Alderman Kennedy.
Here.
Alderman Boyd. Alderwoman Davis.
Present.
Alderman Coatar. Alderman Ogilvy.
Here.
Alderwoman Boyd.
Here.
Alderman Bosley. Alderman Oldenburg. Chairman Rhodey.
Present.
Alderman Boyd. Alderman Coatar. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Oldenburg. 5 present. You have a quorum.
Madam Clerk, I understand that Alderman Bosley was in a car accident. Can you update us on his condition
I was just told by Mary Cullins that teens ran a light or a stop sign going like 80 and totaled his car. I don't think he went to the hospital right away. But he must have just went. But because he was here yesterday, she said.
He probably didn't want to admit it.
Yeah.
No, he's hurt. He just didn't.
Yeah.
Because I saw him yesterday.
Yeah, that's what she said. He was here yesterday.
When was the accident?
I think it was the night before.
Okay, so Monday night then.
I think so. Mary Cullins told me.
Alderman Oldenburg and Alderman Boyd asked to be excused today, and Alderman Coatar will be here shortly, I presume. So just kind of, we haven't met yet this session, just a little bit of an update on a couple things. I presume most people are aware that the alderman from the 25th has been expressed some concern about getting some things changed down here and is holding off on holding committee hearings until we get some adjustments or doing any tax abatement. And so I and Linda Martinez and Otis Williams have been meeting, trying to get an idea about what we need to do, and I think I'm in complete support of what the alderman from the 25th is trying to accomplish. And I want to kind of give you a little bit of an update on what discussions we're having and where we're going. I think the alderman from the 25th and I both share the opinion that we really do need to have a map by zone that shows what incentives are available in which parts of town to what extent. So right now there's, I think, a growing frustration that of somewhat inconsistent types of recommendations on tax abatements. In other words, some neighborhoods that are fairly strong are getting more abatement and so forth. It's been an ongoing problem. I think that can be clarified if we have a map. I saw the first iteration. We've been working on a map for a while over there. It sounds a lot easier than it is, but they have the first iteration of the first map, which would be kind of your single family, smaller scale residential. And they've made quite a bit of progress on that, and I think that we'll probably have a version of residential map, kind of small scale, projects lower than less than $1 million. That map, I think, is getting, pretty far down the line. Now, what I think we all need to understand, I should probably be speaking into the microphone, is that different projects have different profit profiles and different reasons why we might want to incentivize them. We might want to incentivize single-family homes to help stabilize a neighborhood. We might want to incentivize an office building because we're wanting to create jobs for the city, and we might want to, incentivize a shopping center because that'll bring revenue for the city. And each of those are going to probably have a different schedule associated with them, but they are working on that. The second thing that the alderman from the 25th is concerned about is, and I share this concern, I think virtually every alderman on the board shares this, is a beefed up planning department, and we haven't identified any specific money for that, but there are some ideas floating around. And then something that probably people aren't aware of, I didn't know it was happening up until recently, and that is where we pass redevelopment plans. Those plans expire, and I didn't even know this was going on, but LCRA at the staff level, even after the plan's been expired, will go ahead and approve tax abatement for a project in a redevelopment area that's expired. And and that's been being done either at the staff level or perhaps at the board level over there, but the redevelopment plan by ordinance says that it's for such and such a date, but I guess there's, I've visited with Julian Bush at the city councilor's office, and I still don't understand how they can do that, but evidently that's been done. So that whole process is working on getting that to tighten down. The idea that we're having incentive reform and we have redevelopment plans that are in essence 10 years old, and have expired 10 years ago, and we're still at the staff level granting tax abatement in them. So they're trying to get their arms around that. There's evidently quite a few of these things out there, and we don't have a real clear understanding, but we will probably be having a very standardized approach to that so that we're not treating all of those things separately. So with that kind of as a little bit of a prologue to today's meeting, going forward, Alderman from the 25th kind of raised this issue. I don't think we should be passing tax abatement bills out of our committee until they're ready to go over there. So I think out of a spirit of unity, at least for right now, our goal would be to, we have a number of hearings that are scheduled because we have to advertise for them. So our goal would be to go ahead and continue to have those meetings, have the committee so that we, satisfy the public hearing component of that so that we're not wasting that money, but probably hold those bills in committee until we at least make a little bit more progress on that front, if that's kind of agreeable to everybody. So anyway, that's my update. I don't know if there's any questions or anything. Not that I have a whole lot more than that to share, but that's kind of where we are. Are the two of you obligated to get back over to the other? Okay, so why don't we go ahead and have a motion now to take up Board Bill number 2. We'll get a vote recorded, and then we can go. Huh? Okay, Board Bill number 3. Excuse me, I was just going by numeric order. So how about Board Bill number 3, if we could have a motion?
I move what is it, Board Bill number 3, before us for discussion purposes.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Hearing no discussion, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Kennedy.
Aye.
Alderman Boyd. Alderwoman Davis.
Aye.
Alderman Coatar. Alderman Ogilvy.
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Bosley. Alderman Oldenburg. Chairman Rhodey.
Aye.
5 yes votes.
Okay. So we'll begin. Alderman from the 10th.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank everyone. Board Bill number 3, highly controversial. No, this is the State Hospital grounds, the rear half of it. The State Hospital is on Arsenal, bounded by Brannan and Sublette and Fyler. This is the Fyler side, the south side of it, which has been occupied by Premier Charter School and the St. Louis Soccer Academy, both being leased from the state. The Premier Charter School has purchased this property and is just attempting to rezone the half that where the soccer academy was. They're going to expand their campus later on, so we're simply rezoning it to make anything for them easier. There's no effect to the city whatsoever. There's no cost to the city whatsoever for this. It's merely a simple rezoning so that they can expand their campus in the future. Any questions? I have Ms. Hartburton here in case we need some technical answers.
Alderman Kennedy, any questions?
No questions.
Thank you, sir. And thank you for recognizing my seniority, sir.
It's all that great.
Yeah, that's lots. I didn't have it when I got down here.
Okay, enough of the side chatter here. We're conducting business. Alderwoman Davis.
No questions.
Alderman Ogilvy. No questions. Alderwoman Boyd.
No questions.
Hearing no other questions, the chair will entertain a motion that we pass out Board Bill number 3.
So move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded.
With due
Request for
passage.
previous roll. Hearing no objections, we'll consider Board Bill number 3 as heard, read, and passed out of committee with the due
Thank you
passage.
for your attention and for your wonderful service to our city. Thank you.
All right, Board Bill number 2, Alderwoman from the 11th.
Good morning. I honestly don't even know where to start on this because it's a great project in my ward. I'll let those who came to represent Apex Metal talk about this. But basically what's happened on South Broadway, which most of you know is a very industrial area, but it's also seen some hard times. I have 3 different companies shifting around and expanding, so kind of a domino effect going on where one company is buying another company to expand, that company is buying another building to expand, and then another company is buying another vacant building to expand. So they're all adding jobs. They're good-paying jobs. They've built, so far, the expansions the right way. So I am excited about this. I'm excited to have 3 growing companies and 3 good employers in my ward. With that, and I will let Commissioner Burton talk about the zoning. And do you want to explain that?
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. This is really just a simple cleanup. It was initiated by the process when they came in to talk to us about a building permit application, and we discovered that the parcel was dual zone. So when there's new construction, we like for people to clean up the zoning map. So they're really just taking the dual zoning of J and K and rezoning it to K. That allows for all the activity that's really already occurring there, and then for their future expansion too.
Any questions of the zoning department or of the alderman from the 11th? Alderman Kennedy,
No questions.
Alderwoman Davis,
No questions.
Alderman Ogilvy. No questions. Alderwoman Boyd.
No questions.
Hearing no other questions, the chair will entertain a motion that we pass out of committee with a do-pass recommendation, Board Bill number 2.
So moved.
Second.
Moved, second.
Previous.
Okay. Vice Chair, you're supposed to be a little prompter with that.
Sorry.
Okay, it's been moved second, request for previous roll. There is no objections to previous roll, so we consider Board Bill number 3 is passed out of committee. Board Bill number 2 passed out of committee with a do-pass recommendation. The alderman from the 7th was supposed to be here by now. I think you're done, Alderman.
Oh, okay. I didn't know you could say thank you or anything.
I think it's always appropriate to say thank you to
But I was going to say thank you.
the members of the merciful members of the HUD's committee. The alderman from the 7th was supposed to be here by now, but he is not. Mary, do you feel comfortable speaking to this?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Board Bill 10 results as, it's actually a companion bill to 2 other board bills that are moving through the process right now. That's Board Bill 32 by Alderman Boyd, and that is amending Chapter 8, the licensing part of the city's code. And then it's also a companion to Board Bill 57 in Alderman Kennedy is sponsoring, and that is part of the property maintenance code. Those 2 board bills address a process that we do in the city called a plat and petition, and there's a list of about 13 different uses that require the plat and petition. They range from everything from a pawnbroker to a bed and breakfast to a tattoo parlor to a rooming house, a
But
boarding
liquor
house.
license, including liquor license.
No, it has nothing to do with liquor
That's
license.
all I wanted to hear. Okay.
Yes, has nothing to do with liquor license.
All I wanted to hear.
It's where a person has to go around and get a majority of signatures within a circle, much like a liquor license, but it's just to get a separate license to run that use. So there are people that working on those 2 board bills, and as a result of changing the plat and petition process in those 2 board bills, it creates some changes that we want to do to the zoning code. And so some examples, what this Board Bill 10 does is it takes some of those uses that require a plat and petition, and now it either makes them a use by right in certain districts, or it makes them need a conditional use hearing in certain districts, or it may make them not allowed in those districts, and then they would have to go to the Board of Adjustment. So to give you some examples, like right now, a hotel needs a plat and petition, but it also needs a conditional use hearing in our commercial districts. And so I think most of us could probably agree that that's a little bit overkill to make a hotel in a commercial district go through the plat and petition and the conditional use when you get the opportunity to have public input in both of those places. So we didn't want to take the plat and petition away and then just make the hotel a use by right, and no one would have, you know, if the neighborhood or the elected official or anyone that was interested wouldn't have any ability to like place conditions on it. But a quicker process would be to just go through the conditional use process. So that's an example of one thing it does. Another thing it does is, in the instance of a tattoo parlor in a commercial district, that is another use that required both a plat and petition and a conditional use hearing. And so this board bill, since we're taking the plat and petition process away, just makes the tattoo parlor have to go to a conditional use hearing. What this board bill doesn't do is it doesn't take away the plat and petition for some uses that we may want to go through that kind of scrutiny, and that's like rooming houses, boarding houses. I'm trying to think of what the other one is. I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank. Anyway, or social rehabilitation facilities and stuff like that. So that's kind of, this board bill is resulting from the changes in the other two board bills, and it's an attempt to try to like modernize our process a little bit. We did some research a few years ago when the plat and petition process came up and found that there wasn't any other city in the state still using that plat and petition process. But they were, you know, in the interest of getting public input, they were still having a conditional use hearing or Board of Adjustment hearing. I hope that explains it. No?
No, let me make, so you're saying other cities don't do plat and petitions for?
Not for these specific uses. So I know it's that plat and petition terminology is used a lot when getting a liquor license, but this has nothing to do with liquor license. It's just a list of specific uses for some reason that were called out in either Chapter 8 or Chapter 25 to get a plat and petition on top of the zoning review that they already received.
They have to go out and collect signatures?
Right. So to give you an example in your ward of a problem that this created is a while back when Massage Luxe was opening up. So they were in the ground floor of a high-rise building, and it became very problematic for the zoning inspector to get into the building that was secured in order to verify the petition, the signatures on the petition. And it ended up taking about 4 to 5 months to get that process complete because we have to verify the signatures before we can allow that application to move forward through BPS and that process. But we felt like a more efficient way of addressing that was for that to just have a conditional use hearing that still posts it on the site, advertises it, gives anyone who has, you know, any feelings one way or the other about the business to come and provide input, suggest conditions that are put on it.
Do you have, so I know there's been some discussion about Airbnb. Where are Air, this,
So at the
does
current-
this have anything to do
No,
with
it has
Airbnb?
nothing,
So
yeah.
is there any, or has anybody introduced anything on Airbnb yet, or?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. So this doesn't have anything to do with Airbnb, and it's just removing a group of uses that used to have to do plat and petition.
Well, what it's doing is it's making a group of uses that either, or that did have the plat and petition, it's now moving them over into zoning where they would either have a conditional use hearing or they would go to the Board of Adjustment if we take that plat petition away. So a good example would be, in the I district right now, a homeless shelter is use by right. But the way that the public might have some input on that is that it requires a plat and petition. Well, in the new legislation, it will require a plat and petition, and it will also go to a conditional use hearing in that district. So it's not relaxing the restrictions on every use. Some uses we're requiring them to do the hearing. Some uses, like the hotel, where we're not requiring the hotel to do the hearing in a conditional, in a commercial district.
Is there a way, like, you can show us, like, on a flow chart, where you'd have uses but does it vary by zoning? I guess it.
Yeah, every use is looked at differently depending, well, just exactly looked at on how it's zoned. So a restaurant, for example, could be a use by right in one district, not allowed in another, or a conditional use hearing.
And this is just one piece of a series of
No, there are two other companion bills moving through the Public Safety Committee that address the portions of the code that require certain uses to get plat and petitions. They're not all in one place. Rooming houses, boarding houses, dormitories, hotels, those type of uses were in Chapter 25, the Property Maintenance Code. And then other kind of uses like the pawnbrokers, tattoo parlors, arcades, bathhouses, those were over in Title 8. So that is Board Bill 32 that Alderman Boyd is sponsoring, and then in Chapter 25, that is Board Bill 57 that Alderman Kennedy is sponsoring, which is part of the Property Maintenance Code.
quite a bit to digest here, but
I don't feel comfortable with
yeah.
this.
Why don't we at least go through and see some of the other questions? Alderman Kennedy, you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this bill or actions really as a result of the other two that enable this to happen? Is that my understanding?
Right. Changes that were made in the other two board bills left some uses with no hearing at all.
Right.
And, you know, some of those uses were uses that we felt like you might want that opportunity to have a hearing and place some conditions so that the use can exist with the residents. So it necessitated us making some changes to the zoning code so that we didn't create the loophole where a boarding house would be a use by right in the I district and there would be no hearing or no plat and petition process.
But this bill is not, this bill stands alone. It does not have to have the other two passed for this one to be?
Ideally, we'd want, actually, if this one passed, it wouldn't create any problems
Right.
for us. You know, it wouldn't create any loopholes. Ideally, we want them all to move forward at the same time.
Same time.
But if this one passed, it wouldn't create any
Wouldn't cause
loopholes, yeah.
All right, that's all I had. Thank you.
Sure.
Alderwoman Davis?
I guess I'm a bit confused because I know that people do want to have some more direct knowledge of halfway houses, group homes.
And that hasn't changed. Those will all still get a plat and petition. They fall under a term in the, which is not part of the zoning code, but over in the property maintenance code where it defines those type of uses, they fall under a term that is called special residential uses. And that includes stuff like homeless shelters, group homes, halfway houses, penal institutions, transitional living facilities, social rehabilitation facilities, 24-hour daycares, that sort of uses. So those will still have a hearing and a plat and petition.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry I'm late.
Alderman Davis, you have any other questions?
I do. So here where it says the following conditional uses may be allowed in the F neighborhood commercial district, subject to the provisions of the section 26.80. And it says any use eligible to be a conditional use in the E multiple family dwelling district. So that would include the Airbnbs.
I'm sorry.
Would that include the Airbnbs that we've been
So
talking
at the
about?
present time, our zoning code doesn't address Airbnbs.
At all?
At all, yeah. I have, at this time, I have no jurisdiction over Airbnb at
Okay.
all, but I understand that it is something that's being worked on. So it's just that
Okay.
I have no jurisdiction over it in the zoning
And
code.
then under the same list of being,
Alderman, are you on page 7?
I'm on page 3 of 11, page 3. Because this says repealing a part of, and so that's why I want to just make sure I'm clear on what we're repealing.
So I'm not an attorney, but our attorney is here, but I think I can explain that by saying that when we make amendments to the zoning code, we repeal the whole section that we're going to amend, and then we institute a whole new section. That way, we're not just cutting and pasting words and we might miss a word. Is that?
Oh, yeah, I got that part clear.
Okay.
It's, yeah,
In the back, behind the board bill, there's actually a marked up version that will show you the changes. It's exhibit, so exhibit marked up version of board bill. So it will show you in that section what's being, bold's being added. I assume the bold is being added as conditional uses. But that's at all helpful to show you what's changed.
I don't want anything circumventing my community having the opportunity to determine whether or not they want packaged liquor stores. I don't want
This has
anything
nothing
to
to
do
do
with
with
that.
This has nothing
Okay.
to do with liquor stores.
I don't have any, I don't want any.
Well, to be clear, in the, as a conditional use, you know, packaged liquor is on that list, but it was previously on that.
Yeah,
It just has moved letters, moved down. But that would mean, being conditional use means it still would
It
require.
requires-
Right.
Yes.
This is
Okay.
a totally different.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not changing anything there. If the letter's underlined and bolded, that just means that the letter was changed to reflect the new letter. Because
Okay.
we had to basically renumber everything.
Okay.
Right. So we had a new alphabetical order there, basically.
Okay.
And then you don't have it on the changes. Because I don't see it on here.
Do you guys have a copy of the exhibit? Is that attached?
The updated
Right.
conditional use.
Yeah,
one that
it's here.
highlighted.
So anything that's bolded and underlined
Uh-huh.
is new information. And I don't think this one actually does any brackets. It's all just additional information that's being added, and so those are the things that are being added to the zoning code as far as changes.
Okay. Yeah, I don't see it.
Okay, so, page 9, section 6. So this list that's here, the following condition uses may be allowed in K unrestricted districts. It lists the alcohol and drug abuse treatment centers, daycares, bathhouses, billiards, and fireworks and everything else. So these things will be allowed without a hearing.
No, these will require a conditional use hearing. They're currently allowed without any kind of a zoning hearing,
Okay,
but they have a plat and petition. Now they're going to have a plat and petition, and then they're also going to have a conditional use hearing.
That's
So
good.
this is an example of
it's
some
two
kind of
problems.
uses are going to be regulated a little more tightly, and then some other uses are going to not be regulated a little more tightly. That would be
Okay.
like the hotels and the
Mary,
tattoo.
what K district, where do we even have any K districts?
You have a lot
I have,
of, yeah.
Kosciuszko's K.
You-
Okay, so the
and then
industrial
along
area
the-
and the riverfront's K.
uh-huh.
But is that area in Alderman Chairman Rody's ward, like where the warehouses are there, Willard?
There's a little bit of J and K, but a lot of that's getting rezoned because of the development, you know,
Right.
around the IKEA
Right.
and that area there.
Yeah. Which we're adding, we're adding some restrictions to the
Right.
unrestricted zone.
Yeah, I know, that's always kind of a misconception. Unrestricted has restrictions.
I just know anything that you want to do, I don't care what you do in the rest of the city, but don't come in the 19th Ward dealing with anything that allows packaged liquor stores,
Right.
okay?
We, no.
We worked hard to get rid of all those liquor stores.
So I don't have liquor.
This would not impact any existing.
Yeah, we're completely separate from the excise division, so nothing about what's happening, this doesn't supersede anything about what's happening in the liquor license moratorium. That's still in place. That's a separate process.
Oh, okay.
So even if somebody came and got permission from zoning to do a packaged liquor store, they still have to meet the liquor license requirement. Our approval doesn't mean anything if they don't get
And
that.
there would still be a hearing.
Right.
With public notice and everything else. I mean, so if someone were to apply for a package, as currently the law, if you apply for a packaged liquor store, you first check, one, is there a moratorium here? If there's not, then you still have to, get your liquor license and then go through a conditional use hearing,
Okay,
which is where notice will be provided to you.
okay. You know, I'm gonna try to trust you on this, but I will hurt you if I,
No, I understand. Look, I can
We worked
say,
too
I've been working
hard.
with these guys for a while on this. They're really trying to clean up and modernize certain sections of the code. I think there's still plenty of checks in place for neighborhood input, aldermanic input in this process, but in some instances, we are getting rid of some of the onerous plat petition requirements.
okay. I don't wanna make it difficult for development. I don't wanna make it difficult at all. But I really have to protect my community, when it comes to some of these other things. And they, okay, I'm done, sir.
Is there a way that you can take this and out of all the legalese and put it like in a flow chart or something?
It's really hard to read. I need something separate. I agree.
Am I making,
Maybe like
I'm sure we could have, somebody could.
so like, what, so you have all this different zoning, and depending on what the zoning is, you're gonna have different requirements about what's by right and what's required, and I was
Right.
just,
So if you, Chairman, I don't know, are you looking at the marked up version?
I'm looking at the
Actual board bill.
exhibit,
Okay,
so.
which if you go sort of by section.
It kind of, I guess it's kind of like that. It's just, this is a lot to take in, kind of in a live meeting, but not that I ever paid terrible close attention to this stuff, except for whenever somebody wanted to do something that
This is
required
probably the
something.
most thrilling stuff we do here.
Yeah.
shows the changes.
All right, well, why don't we keep going here and see what other, Alderman Ogilvy? Any questions?
Sure, thanks.
Go over there, because I think the mayor's in there.
Mary, which bill is going to remove some of the plat and petition requirements?
It's actually two board bills, so board,
A vote that they can use, but I don't want to vote for it.
Change it.
oh, that's right, I'm sorry. No, it does, the hotel.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so, sorry. Board Bill 32 makes amendments to what we call Title 8, the License Collector's Office, and that's a board bill that Jeffrey Boyd is sponsoring. So a lot of the uses that are in that Chapter 8 are ones that we're going to be removing the plat and petition requirement from. So those are things like an arcade, a bathhouse, pawnbrokers, tattoo parlors. We have a odd use called a public photographic studio, which we think is a terminology that was used a long time ago before we had regulations for like adult entertainment centers and that kind of stuff. We think, we don't know. So those are the types of uses that we're not going to have a plat and petition anymore. But in those areas where they were a use by right, areas meaning the zoning districts, they'll now just go to a conditional use hearing. Then in Chapter 25, which is the Property Maintenance Code, that is the section of the code that called for a plat and petition for uses like the hotel, the boarding house, rooming house, dormitory, and the special residential uses. Of those uses, we're not going to require hotels to do a plat and petition anymore, but in the districts where a hotel would have been a use by right, it'll just have a conditional use. That way, it'll still have an opportunity for public input. The other type of uses we think are uses that neighborhoods might want to have input on, and that's like the rooming houses, boarding houses, homeless shelters. In those areas, they are still going to have a plat and petition, and they are also going to have a conditional use hearing.
Right, so, like, I think the terminology in here, it's not your fault, but it's just sort of old terminology, so we don't really have bathhouses anymore, but,
We actually
Right.
have a
We have-
bathhouse. We have
okay.
one licensed bathhouse in the city.
My ward.
fair enough.
Yeah.
We got one, but,
Yeah.
but
I know
like,
there really is one.
massage, places that offer massage, it is obviously kind of an onerous, nobody really thinks of massage
Right,
studios now as a detrimental use. It's probably a desirable use, I think a lot of people would assume. And so the plat and petition process is an onerous process for them to complete in order to operate. I think the same is true for tattoo studios, many of which are sole proprietors, and it can be difficult to complete that plat and petition process for a small business, especially depending on, as you mentioned, where they happen to be and how easy it is to get access to neighboring properties, et cetera.
So I don't know if you can tell by reading that, but just so you know, this piece of legislation would now require the bathhouse massage establishments to not have a plat and petition.
Right.
But they
Instead
would
have
still
a
have a conditional use
conditional
hearing.
use, right.
And then for the tattoo parlor, there would be no plat and petition for them. They would be a conditional use in the commercial districts, and then they're permitted in like the industrial districts. And that's because tattoo parlors don't have the same
Right.
kind of connotation that they used to have, so they're much more
They're
acceptable.
jazzy now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I didn't see it, but are there any changes to bed and breakfasts, or is the other bill going to remove the plat and petition process for bed and breakfast?
Only changes to the bed and breakfast. We have 3 different types of bed and breakfasts for those that don't know: the homestay, the guest house, and the inn. The only change for those is they don't have to go through a plat and petition, but already on top of the plat and petition, they needed a hearing no matter what zoning district they were in. They were either a conditional use or they were not allowed. So now they will still have their hearing, they just won't have that plat and petition
Right.
component.
If and when the other bill passes. Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
right, correct.
And then the most changes, though, it looks like, are in K district and downtown in this bill, correct?
Right. And that's because those are the 2 districts where the most uses were allowed as a use by right, but had the plat and petition, and now that we're taking that away,
We're going to add them as conditional
use,
uses.
right.
Okay. Well, I think on balance, I think this is a good thing, because I think for some time we've been making it difficult for uses that we actually find desirable to operate. And I know personally in some cases where people decided not to open or are operating quasi-illegally because the process is so challenging. So, I think this is a step in the right direction. It's also important that we pass the other bill, Alderman Boyd's bill, in conjunction. So I'm happy with this personally. That's all.
Alderman Boyd?
They asked all the questions.
Well, it's a bit much for me to digest at a meeting here, but I trust that someone's looking at the details, which is, the devil's always in the details and stuff like this, but.
No, I mean, this has gone through various iterations. There's been a lot of time on this. And we didn't want to get it introduced until it was correct, and that we've made sure things that we believe remain controversial, we're still keeping plenty of checks in place to allow for neighborhood and all of that.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So obviously this bill went through the Planning Commission process. Did the other two bills have to go through the planning commission, or they, because they don't deal with zoning, they?
Right.
Okay, got it. Okay, that's my only question. Thanks.
All right, hearing no other questions, Chair will entertain a motion on Board Bill number 10.
I move that we pass Board Bill 10 with a due pass recommendation.
Second. Been moved and seconded. We will not use the previous roll, so Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Kennedy.
Aye.
Alderman Boyd. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Coatar. Alderman Ogilvy. Alderwoman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Bosley. Alderman Oldenburg. Chairman Rhodey.
Aye.
6 yes votes to have a quorum. I mean, yeah. I said quorum.
All right, having no other business before us, the Chair will entertain a motion that we adjourn.
So move.
Moved, second.
I'm just worried.
Favor, aye.
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 All right.